Hello everyone, good afternoon. It's just afternoon. I'm Alison Cleary and some of you will know me if you were here last week. I'm a Director of Parlour and currently also the outgoing Executive Director of Open House Melbourne. This series, Light at the End of the Tunnel, is, as many of you know, a collaboration between Parlour and Monash Architecture at Monash University. Before we start, I just want to acknowledge the traditional custodians of country right across Australia's many nations and recognise their continuing connection to land, waters and culture. In particular, I'll acknowledge the people of the Greater Kulin Nations, who are the traditional custodians of the lands on which Monash University operates and on which those of us in the better parts of Melbourne are currently situated. We pay our respects to elders past, present and emerging, and to Indigenous Australians who are part of the Parlour community. So, we've come of age in a traditional sense. This is the 21st session of Light at the End of the Tunnel. The series that Parlour has set up looking into architecture as a profession, a discipline and a practice, and how it is and will be affected by the current COVID pandemic. Today's session is going to be a great one. It's looking at ethics in practice, and we're very fortunate to have with us today Lee Hillam and Stephanie Bullock to offer some advice and insight. And Justine is going to introduce them in a bit more detail shortly. But first of all, as usual, the protocols. So please make sure that your microphone is on mute unless you're actually speaking. We also ask you to leave your camera on, however, because we like to see lots of faces. And it gives us a greater sense of who's in the virtual room with us. And if you're willing to do that, that would be fantastic. As you know, the events are informal but informative. And Justine and I will be taking it in turns to ask questions and to keep things flowing, but we really encourage you to send some questions in from the floor as well. So if you do, put it in the chat function, which is at the bottom. I'm pointing at my screen, you can't see this, at the bottom of your screen. And we will then choose the questions and ask you, if you're able to actually ask the questions yourselves. If you're not, for some reason, if you need to, you've got kids in the room, whatever reason you can't, then we will ask it on your behalf. It's very interesting to hear what you think about what's being said, and also put in, if you've got any commentary about experiences you've had in this space, include it in the chat as well. We won't necessarily get to all of the questions, but they help inform our future events and plans. And it also gives us tips about any follow-up resources or materials that we can supply you. So now, Justine, would you like to introduce Stephanie and Lee for us?
I'd be delighted to. So I'm very, very happy to have Lee and Stephanie here with us for this session, looking at how we put ethics into practice. Lee and Stephanie are both directors of practices that are certified B Corp businesses. And the B Corp businesses are described as one that meets the highest standard of verified social and environmental performance, public transparency and legal accountability to balance profit and purpose. I have spoken to them both separately about being B Corps on and off for a while, and I've wanted to get them together for a very long time. And I'm very pleased when I finally worked out that the Light at the End of the Tunnel session was a way to do that. So I'm very, very pleased to have you both here. Lee is a director of Dunn & Hillam, a Sydney-based practice that she established with Ashley Dunn in 2000. She was also, until very recently, a senior design advisor at the Government Architects Office in New South Wales. Stephanie is a founding director of Kozloff Architecture here in Melbourne. And before becoming an architect, she had a career as a management consultant and project manager in the financial services industry. Both are very committed to equity, matters of equity and fairness, and the kind of embedding of that within the practices that they run. Both are very smart and generous. They're committed to making good workplaces and excellent buildings. Both are long-time friends of Parlour, and we're very pleased to have them here. So, welcome, Lee and Stephanie. And I thought we'd just start off by asking you a little bit about a B Corp. I mean, I just read the bit off the B Corp website. But can you each tell us how and why you became a B Corp and what it means? Who wants to start?
You go, Stephanie.
So B Corp is, I guess, a framework for sustainable and ethical business. And one of the things that I've always found very interesting about it is the fact that it's independent and independently audited and administered. It's a framework, so it sort of works on a point system, which means that there's no one way to become a B Corp. It's about a cumulative approach in a range of different areas. And in order to register as a B Corp, you need to meet a certain threshold, which is quite high and gets harder every year. So that, I suppose, is a very short summary of what it's about. Because fundamentally, it's about, you know, are you socially responsible? Are you ethical in the way you carry out your business? But every B Corp looks slightly different because they've applied that framework in a slightly different way.
And Lee, what does it mean to you?
Yeah, I think that's I agree with all of that stuff. But the overlay of it, which I've found really interesting, is that because it started in America as an actual change to company law structure, it applies to small practices like ourselves, but also to really big practices where you might have, for example, a CEO who's really focused on ethical issues and fairness. When that CEO moves on, the company can then change direction. But not if you're a registered B Corp. What happens is that your company constitution gets rewritten to mean that in your mission statement, which a normal corporation would say that the mission is to make profit for the shareholders. That's basically the main purpose of all businesses. But with a B Corp, the main purpose is spread across, yes, you've got to make profit, but you've also got to do it in a way that's fair for your staff, stakeholders, shareholders, and the planet in general. And that is enshrined in your constitution. So it moves on, doesn't matter whether the CEO changes or just changes their mind or the board changes. That's part of your company kind of backbone. And I think that's really interesting. And that's, Stephanie, it'd be great to chat to you offline about, that's just become a reality in Australia, because up till now they couldn't work out how to make that kind of legally enshrined within Australian company law. And just sort of a month or two ago, we've been notified that it's actually going to be really simple. And all I have to do now is find where the paperwork for our company constitution is. Yikes, don't know where that's gone. Once I find that, we can make the modification to make it enshrined. So it's I think it's really important, even though some B Corps might look like they're just a 1-person or a 2-person band, and then ourselves and Stephanie's practice are, you know, in the medium size. But then, you know, Patagonia was one of the founding organizations. They employ thousands and thousands of people. So
what motivated you to sort of to do this? I mean, I understand from both of you, it's not an easy thing to get the certification.
No, and I think it's a little bit one of those cases where if I had known the work that was involved in doing it in the beginning, perhaps I would have thought a little bit harder about it. But it felt like I slipped into it in the initial. So I think we've been a B Corp now since 2016. I know we've already been through one kind of audit process, and I think that happens every 3 years. So it was a case where I sort of wanted to test ourselves and see how we would go. You know, they've got kind of online, you can just do this sample test and you get into it, and then you realize, oh, this is actually a lot of stuff they're asking for, and a lot of verification of all your processes that they want to see. And I just got more and more interested in the questions they were asking, I suppose. And before I knew it, I was 3/4 of the way through the auditing process, and thought I just have to keep going now to see what the outcome is going to be. So it's it wasn't. I can't really stand up here and hand on heart say that I knew exactly what I was doing when I started, but I'm very glad to have done it.
And what about you, Stephanie? How did Kosloff decide to go down this path?
So I sort of became aware of the concept of B Corp maybe about 5 or 6 years ago, and I was actually a director of another practice. And I've actually started the B Corp registration process as a director there, and also as a director of an engineering practice. So I'd had a couple of runs in it, to be honest. Again, it was something that I became aware of, was really interested in, really keen to implement it. And in terms of, I guess, Cosloff Architecture, when we founded the practice just over 3 years ago, there were sort of two things that we knew from the outset that we wanted to do. One was we wanted to focus on public work, and the other was that we wanted to be a B Corp. And I think part of the reason for that was the alignment between those two things, but also I was very aware, having tried to implement it elsewhere, just how difficult it can be within, like the larger you are and the more established you are, the harder it can be. So I knew that if we were going to start the practice, if we from the very beginning thought about it as being a B Corp and set up along the lines of a B Corp, that it would be much easier to achieve that. So that was really, and it was incredibly helpful in terms of setting up the practice, because again, there's sort of a framework there that you can use to guide decision making and strategy.
And does that framework sort of steer you in a direction that is different than were you running a practice without that? Even if you kind of, you know, want to be an ethical and, you know, well-behaved practice, does the B Corp give you a frame? Does it sort of send you off in a slightly different way, or does it kind of
Yeah, I think it's more that it gives depth. So there wasn't anything where we sort of went, oh, you know, that's really misaligned with what we would do anyway. There was a lot of alignment. So there were a lot of things that we would have done anyway, in terms of, you know, staff engagement surveys and HR practices that we were really interested in. But it probably highlighted other opportunities, and some of them quite micro, you know, even in terms of, you know, you're setting up a business to make a whole range of decisions about your supply chain, about, you know, who you purchase things from and so forth. And I probably wouldn't have thought about it as deeply as I did if I hadn't been in the process of registering as a B Corp. So it brings a level of interrogation and integrity to a whole range of decisions that you make, that I think is really helpful. So it's more, I guess, that, you know, it really shines a spotlight on a whole range of things that you might not think of initially. Well, that was my experience anyway.
Yeah, it's the same. It's like they ask you all these questions, and you know, you find you can answer them straight up because you are doing it, or you, like you say, Stephanie, you're aligned already. So, but at any point they can turn around and say, "Great, can we see your official policy on that?" And you go, "Oh, yeah, right." And then they say, "And can we see your staff induction policy that shows where you are making all your staff aware of that?" And you go, "Oh, right." So, like, for example, we in the early days, we got asked about staff bonuses, and there's a lot of stuff about equity in pay. You know, how much does the person who earns the most in your company, how much do they get paid? And the person who earns the least in your company, how much do they get paid? And then you get points. If those two numbers are quite close together, you get points. You know, that's a positive, that's seen as a positive thing. And then they ask you, do you give bonuses? And we'd always had this sort of loose as way of giving bonuses, where we'd get to Christmas and the end of the financial year, and we'd look at the bank account and go, oh, we can kind of, you know, spare $10,000, and we've got 10 people working here, so everyone gets $1,000. You know, like, we just, it was that was the way we did it. And so we wrote that, and they wrote back and said, we're really interested in your bonus policy. Can we see your policy? So then we had to write a policy that said, this is how we do bonuses. And then we had to put it into our staff induction that said, this is how, you know, we will pay you bonuses, and this is how we would decide how much your bonus will be. And so it didn't change anything we were doing, but it put a kind of a scaffold around that practice and really enshrined it in our kind of the way we did things, not forevermore, because we can then rewrite it and say we're now doing our, you know, our bonuses differently or whatever. But it was that kind of experience that made you kind of have a pretty good hard look at yourself, as like you think you're doing good, and you think you're doing all right, and you think you've kind of got the best intentions. But a lot of the time, unless it's somehow enshrined in the policy, then, you know, between me and the other director, Ashley, and I can at any day just decide to change that. So, you know, there's real value, I think, in making it very transparent and sort of locked in, which B Corp made us do. Otherwise, we would just be kind of floating along as we were, I think. So
Lee, with taking that into account and what you've just said then about the policy around bonuses, was there anything that you were doing that it made you change in terms of your practices? And Stephanie also, but I'm interested in terms of having been in practice for X number of years first, did the process in that reflection period make you change the way you did some things?
Yeah, it does. It's constantly making you change things, actually, because you get a little bit focused on getting your points up, and you think you can get a few extra points here if we just. And I'm sure it's all designed to, you know, be exactly like that. And like Stephanie says, some of them are very little. It might be about supply chain. It might be about looking for other B Corps to collaborate with and work with. So in that sense, it's a little bit of a kind of a cult/pyramid scheme where you are encouraged to seek out other B Corps to liaise with and work with. So it definitely does influence, especially when you're in that audit period, to think, okay, I really want my score to get better. And they keep making the audit harder and harder. They deliberately make the test. So our score now is actually lower than when we first were registered, because I guess we didn't improve enough. They want constant improvement. So it's it does kind of give you this carrot, constantly give you this carrot to try and make you look at better ways of doing things. And some are a bit frustrating because you think, like, at the scale you're at or in the industry you're at, you don't feel like you can do much about that to, you know, improve in that sector. But other things, you know, you just tick off little easy boxes, like finding the right supplier for your paper that goes in your printer, for example, and that, you know, that all helps.
What about you, Stephanie? I mean, it is different, as you say, because you sort of set it up with that. But did it end up that you set things up differently than you might otherwise have?
I think it did really affect our supply chain arrangements. I mean, even in terms of, you know, when we first started out, you know, in terms of an office, we decided to go into a co-working space that was a B Corp, you know, because we were planning to become a B Corp. So it probably influenced decisions, you know, to a certain extent. And then when we got our own office, you know, we kind of went back and said, okay, what are all the things we can do in setting up our office? So it was more that it kind of influenced things. I think it probably also put a sense of urgency around other things that otherwise might have puddled along for some time. So things like, you know, going, we're going to be carbon neutral. So we were immediately like, right, we've got to be carbon neutral from the start, or looking at employee shareholding schemes. So I think it lent a sense of urgency and a real reason, because again, if you don't have these are hard things to do sometimes. And if you don't have that impetus, it really gives you a reason to really pursue that, and a time frame as well, because you want to be able to register.
I'm interested in your description of it as a cult/pyramid scheme, Lee. No, I know that. So what has it meant for relationships with potential clients and things like that? Has it actually, you know, has it brought in work that, you know, or and I suppose what's the dark side, is the other side to that cult/pyramid scheme question, isn't it?
I don't think there's a dark side to it, but then I'm a true believer, so I would say that, wouldn't I? I think, like, the downside is that the audit is grueling, and, you know, there's a fair bit of kind of bureaucratic paperwork in that, but, you know, so is being 9001 QA registered certified, which we also are. And if I had to choose between the two, I would ideally I would have B Corp as being something that all the tenders were asking for, rather than tenders asking for QA 9001, because I think that it's something that is more holistic, and really, if you're a local government and you're looking for good people to work with, then you're going to get more information out of finding out someone's a B Corp than you are that they're 9001 certified. So the dark side is And the other thing I think, which I've found a bit hard, is that there is an unbelievable amount of networking available to you. So you are constantly getting sent invitations to meetups or coffees or workshops, or and you feel, I think at first I went really hard on all of that, and I was meeting a million people all the time, and then just that's just hard to work out where the which are the valuable things to participate in and which aren't. But basically, I think what you're doing is you're badging yourself. You know, you're aligning yourself with a certain tribe, and for us, that makes it. That's just sort of an efficient way to describe who we are and where we're sitting in the kind of ethical, moral landscape. That you can just put that B Corp badge there, and that immediately tells people a lot about you straight up. So I think that's worthwhile.
I think that's really true. And I think it's interesting your comment about tenders, because to be honest, we've actually seen an increasing focus on corporate social responsibility and ethical practicing. And so, and it's been incredibly helpful to be a B Corp because of that. You know, there's, you know, Monash University has a schedule on modern slavery and looking at your supply chain, you know, and increasingly, you know, local councils, certainly, you know, state government work, they're looking for answers to questions around what's your position on that as well. And so, you know, there seems to be, I would say there's an equal focus on that as there is on sort of more general quality assurance as well, which is great. It's a really good thing to see. And it certainly has made a difference to us in terms of bidding for work. It's been, we've had feedback on a number of occasions that our B Corp status has made a difference.
Got a question? I just want to flag a question, but I'm just wondering if Alana is is able to ask the questions to do with supply chains. Are you there?
Yes, I am. Hello. I'm wondering, sort of with your supply chains and policies, if you could say some more about that, and also whether being a registered B Corp has influenced the procurement in projects. As you mentioned, tenders, could you say some more about that? Has it led to better outcomes or removed some of the impediments that we face in procurement?
Well, I think, as I was saying before, it's a weighted evaluation criteria in quite a lot of tenders at the moment. And as I said, it's come up, you know, in interviews specifically. I had one interview for a project that we won where I think we spent a good 10 minutes. They actually asked about it and were really interested in it, and it certainly made a difference, you know, and that's fantastic. You know, I think what it can demonstrate, we're finding, is that a good alignment with particular clients. So if clients are really interested in that, that's a great sign that that's somebody that you want to work with. So it's very helpful. Again, as you were saying, Lee, you're kind of badging yourself as having a particular set of values, and that means that you're more likely to work with a particular type of client who shares those values. So, you know, it's not just about winning jobs, it's winning the right jobs, I think, with the right type of client, which is incredibly important, as we all know. But in terms of procurement, as I said, you know, I think it's certainly influenced, you know, decisions right down to, you know, who our cleaners are. Like, we were looking at 2 cleaners when we set up the office, and we had one that had policies around diversity and used particular products and so forth. The price was the same. I think that was slightly more expensive. We went with them. And that was because we were thinking about every aspect of our office and having a healthy environment, and also about the ethics of the people that we were using to supply services.
Right. And sort of one more on the policy question. In building procurement, have you ever had to push back on a client and say, sorry, we can't do this, we're a B Corp, and guide them in a different direction?
In my experience, it's been less having to push back, more trying to encourage them. So sometimes you might have a client who doesn't have a particular position on environmental sustainability, for example. So what it means is that we'll go to them and say, look, you know, we think there's a real opportunity with this project, and actually helping them towards that. So it's taking, I guess, an advocacy role rather than pushing back. So I think, again, that's very front of mind. You know, if you're a B Corp, to kind of go, what's the opportunity with this this project to make a difference, you know, within the project, but also to the broader, I guess, community around it.
What about you, Lee?
Yeah, I agree. But I think the really important thing is that sort of self-selecting thing that does happen once you have badged yourself as a B Corp. Then you probably do scare some people away who don't want to be in an environment where their own ethics might be questioned. They think that, and so the clients that you do end up with are generally pretty aligned. So it's we haven't had a situation where we've had to say, no, we can't do that because it would, it would be against our B Corp sort of certification. But we do, because that B Corp is sort of highly visible in our own minds, we do constantly look for ways that we can bring people along, I suppose. And back to it being a little bit of a cult, where you are actually trying to change the world. You are trying to make people do things a different way. And so wherever you can influence that, you do. And yeah.
I'm really interested in it, and I didn't include this as a question because I've only just thought about it and the questions we already gave you, but we often have people say, in relation to gender equity, oh, it would be great if there was some kind of certification system and you can kind of all the, the practices that are good and have good policies and good approaches can have a tick. And I see the attraction of that, but I'm also terrified of it because I think the amount of work that would go into actually authenticating a practice.
Well, you wouldn't have to worry about it. You'd just be a B Corp.
Exactly. So I'm really interested in this because I've always gone, yeah, that would be great. It would involve an enormous number of resources. The WGEA already has the employer of choice system. Architecture practices could use that. But I think the B Corp thing is another, because it sounds like it has intensive certification, which I think is what's needed, because otherwise people just get the tick and use it as marketing and who knows what they do,
There is a whole sector on gender equity and making sure that the leadership, that the gender balance at leadership level is so.
I'm also just a big believer in using the systems that are there instead of making more all the time. So, and I suppose it's a comment as much as a question, but I am, yes, Mel Bale-Smith is agreeing with me. There we go, that's great. I suppose that I am kind of interested in how this intersects with sort of equity within the equity, equity in many ways. And I know that you bring prior commitments to that. It's not like you kind of discovered gender equity when you became B Corps. But what does this mean what does it mean for staff, and what does I suppose, how do you try and use the systems of the business to enable and improve equity?
Well, I think one of the key things that becoming a B Corp brings, or I guess one of the things that you'll have if you are a B Corp, is around transparency. And I think transparency is a key factor in achieving equity. So if there's transparency around the way the business is run, the way the pay and salary is established, around review systems and so forth, that's a really important thing. So I think transparency generally is probably one of the most important factors. I think the other thing that it does is it provides, if everybody's kind of aware of what you need to do to become a B Corp, it means people have a framework to ask questions, difficult questions if need be, because they're aware that you've got a commitment to certain things, including equity at different levels of management and so forth. So again, you're publicly a B Corp, your hand on your heart, you're saying that this is what you believe in. It entitles or enables people, I believe, to sort of say, well, hang on, if you're in a B Corp and everybody above a certain level is male, that would be odd, for example. So I don't know, my feeling is that perhaps its other value is in providing a framework to question things and to ask perhaps difficult questions.
There's moving on from that in terms of the sort of the frameworks and the systems, and this is picking up a comment that Mel Bale-Smith has made, but also one of the other questions we had on our form for you. So I'm going to roll them in together. And it's around how does a B Corp process integrate with other existing systems and processes. And Mel's comment is around the fact that for very small practices, there's a whole gamut of potential certification and systems that you can get engaged with, but it's very difficult as a small practice to do that. So does being a B Corp, does it make it more difficult to work with other systems and processes? Does it replace them? How does that work? Does it create, Lee, you've already talked about the workload around the audits, but in the long run, is that worthwhile?
I definitely think it is worthwhile, and we certainly do. Our QA audit and our B Corp audit have a lot of crossover. So because we, you know, both are about having stated and transparent policies on the way you work. And so there's definitely work that goes into the B Corp audit that we use in the QA audit. And I agree that if you wanted to go out and get yourself certified in every little thing, you'd just be doing that 100% of the time. You'd be spending all of your time doing that. I am pretty happy that we're B Corp certified, and probably would have chosen that anyway. But as I said before, I wasn't like shopping around all the different certifications and decided that at the time. It was sort of something I fell into. But I think that B Corp, because it's holistic, is a good place. And the smaller the practice is, or the organisation is, the less arduous the audit is, really, because they don't ask you for so much kind of stated policy. You can say, I am a one-person practice, and so therefore, you know, I don't have a policy. They will accept that kind of answer. It's only when you've got staff that you need to have the stated policies. So there is sort of a scaling of the audit, I think. But if you were, you know, if you were Patagonia, or I have heard rumours that Westpac are looking at it, you know, it's like that would be, they would have a team. They would have a team of people in their organisation that were just dealing with the B Corp certification, I would think. So,
yeah, I mean, I agree with Leigh in terms of, I think that there's a lot of things you would do anyway. And I think having, I guess, used it in the establishment of the practice and setting up all of our systems, maybe another, you know, there's just two of us to start with, maybe another way to think of it is as a tool to actually build your practice as well, and to establish those systems. Like, I think it provides a really useful framework and a checklist in terms of what are the things you should be thinking about. So, you know, you start a practice from scratch, it's actually a great tool for that, and it allows you to kind of work through things fairly methodically. If you go through the process of trying to register as a B Corp when you're kind of setting up a practice, or when you're a small practice, I think it actually leads to growth, and it leads you to set up the sort of systems you should have anyway.
Can I just go back to that question of transparency a little bit, because that's something that has come up many times in these sessions, and certainly is seen as a significant thing, contributor to equity, as you said, Stephanie. It's something also that a lot of practice directors are pretty nervous about, you know, how much they share, how much they don't share. And the discussion we had about financial management, there was also the point made that if you're sharing too much financial information and people have no capacity to, and it's scary right now in the middle of COVID, and people have no capacity to do anything about it, then it can just kind of increase anxiety. So I guess there's a few angles on it, but I'm just interested to know, you know, how much do you share, and how do you share
it? We share all, like 100% of the information around the financials on a project by project basis. So if we have a project that comes in and we know we've got $50,000 worth of fees that are available for that project, our timesheet system allows us to put the amount of fees allocated to each person, and therefore how many hours allocated to that person, and they can monitor for themselves how they're tracking against those hours and how much money we're either making or losing on that project. And that's all in the within what they can see. So I think what I've always felt is that I can't go to our staff and tell them, you went over the hours, we're now non-profitable on that project. If they don't have the power to regulate their own time and manage their own time towards a target number of hours, you know, you want people to take responsibility. You've actually also got to give them some power over that task or that element of the work in order for that to be fair, I suppose. That, you know, you can't come down hard on someone for going over the hours if they didn't know how many hours they were supposed to use. So that's all seen. The only place where we might be a little bit less than transparent is on their own salaries, and that's only if they ask for it to be so. We tell them what we're getting paid and how we're getting paid, and we tell them how we're deciding what their wage should be. You know, like we're saying, this is where we've looked, and we've got a pretty tight network of architects similar size as us in Sydney, and we will ring around when we're putting on someone new. We'll ring around all our mates and say, what are you paying this person? And then we'll tell them, the new staff member, that, well, if you were working at this practice, you'd be getting this. And so I can't see, like, I would share all the wage information, but I just think sometimes that's not my decision to make. So that's the only place where we don't share it. So,
what about you, Stephanie? How does Costloff?
Yeah, we're very similar in terms of there's complete transparency around project fees and profitability and costs. We also share all of our financial information. So we do quarterly and half year and full year reporting on how the practice is progressing in terms of profit and loss. You know, and I think it's an interesting comment about how people are nervous about it. You're right. It's probably the one thing I get asked the most about. People going, oh my God, you know, how much do you tell people? And we're like, yeah, we share with them the profit and loss. And, you know, we didn't really make a profit for the first couple of years. And on one hand, you go, well, that might be terrifying for people. I actually don't think it is. I think it's really important that people understand the context that you're sort of operating in. You need to treat people like adults. In terms of salaries, it sounds quite similar. We subscribe to all the salary surveys, and then we put that all into a spreadsheet. And then when we sit down to review salaries with everybody, we go through and say, right, these are all the bands. So we'll say for a graduate architect with 4 years of experience, these are all the surveys. This is the high, low, medium, average. This is what you're being paid relative to that and why. The only thing we don't share is we don't tell them this person is being paid that. We don't think that's our role to do that. But having said that, you know, if, we've had the conversation about to say, you know, what would happen if somebody, you know, because we don't, because we have bands, it's not that everybody within that band gets paid the same. You get paid within the band based on your skills and experience. So for example, we have graduate architects that are on different salaries within that band. If they asked us the question as to, you know, I found out such and such is on this much, why I'm on this much, we'd feel very comfortable having that conversation because it's been based on a really rigorous discussion around that. And as part of those bands, they can see what directors are paid as well. So it's also in the financials. So it's all very transparent. And to be honest, it was one of the things I was most attracted to with B Corp. I think transparency is a really important principle if you want people to be really engaged in what they do.
Okay, there's Alison. Should we go to Nicolette?
Yes, sorry, I was on mute. I was about to say that. Nicolette, hello.
Where are you, Nicolette?
You're on mute, Nicolette.
Sorry, I'm unmuted now. So I was just wondering, I think it's fantastic. I love this idea of being able to empower people within your offices to understand the fees and their relationship between the hours they have to work on a job and profitability. And I think it leads to a much less weird relationship between architects and money, which I think is a real thing for a lot of practices. Is this assisting both of your respective practices to be more profitable because people in your organisations understand better what that means? And also, is it helping you set more realistic fees?
I think so for us, definitely. You know, and we're increasingly we get our staff involved right from the bid phase. So they're involved in actually working out the fee as opposed to, you know, we win a job and then we go, this is how much money we've got, good luck with that.
Right.
So, you know, they're often involved in, and look, in some cases, because we do a lot of VSBA education work, the fees are set anyway, which is super helpful. But, you know, in terms of kind of trying to work it out, again, it's an education process. If people understand how you work out a fee, if they're involved in that, you know, and that goes right through, you know, in terms of, you know, variations for jobs. You know, we'll often have, you know, I'm just thinking of a couple of examples where I've got graduate architects where there'll be a variation come through. I'll get them to work it out and then show me. And it's really important that they understand that because they're the ones that are then having to work out how many hours will this take and then work out the fee and we'll have a chat about it and then we put it forward and then they're accountable and responsible for that. So I think it definitely helps.
Fantastic.
We do exactly the same thing, Stephanie. That's amazing to hear. And it is really part of the education as architects to understand how long things take. You know, a graduate or someone with little experience will always underestimate how long something takes. And so, you know, you go to them for a fee estimate or even just a variation estimate and they'll say, I can get this done in 10 hours. And you say, okay, I'm going to put 20 hours in the variation. And they say, oh, well, we'll make a lot of profit. We won't need that. And then the end of the job, we're just like, right, so we capped that job out at 22.5 hours. Well, that's okay. So I think it is really important with, we use Coincraft for all our timesheeting and stuff, and they've got great ways where you can show the difference between what the fee is, what the fee would have been if you were working on an hourly rate, which is always a bit of a shocker, and then what the costs are as opposed to the fee. And that's all available to every person. And more than that, though, we actually ask people to report on that in our general meetings. So we have fortnightly general meetings. And if you're, we try and give everyone in the office at least one project that they're running, even if they're almost a student, they might be doing some tiny little job, but they've got that job, they're responsible for it. And in the general meeting, we say to the student, so how are we going on the hours? Are we making any profit on this job? And they have to basically regurgitate what the Coincraft is telling us. We could look for ourselves, but that's not the point. The point is to get them to be really aware.
That's great. I think it's so healthy. I've worked in offices that have done what you're talking about, and it's been really empowering. And I've worked in other offices where it's all been smoke and mirrors, and you're not allowed to record overtime hours and all this sort of weird shit. And I'm going, how will you ever know whether we've actually done this job within a certain fee or not if you're not even recording people's overtime? It's just dysfunctional. But they prefer not to know.
And you've got to, I think from my point of view, a lot of the stuff that I do is for my own self-interest. Like, I need to sleep at night. So I need to know whether we're making any money or not. And I have had so many discussions with our staff over so many years that I do not want people fudging their timesheets. I don't care if they went down the wrong track, if they made a big mistake and they had to redo something, I don't want them not putting those hours in the timesheet, because, making a mistake and going around in circles is part of the process sometimes. So you've got to factor that in. When you look at the next job, I can't go back and say, oh, look, that house in Mossy Point, we managed to make a heap of profit on that and did it for 400 hours. And when the truth was we did it for 650 hours and lost a lot of money. I need to be able to have accurate data to write the next fee proposal. So people are really inclined to fudge their timesheets to either make me not feel so bad or make themselves not feel so bad, or I don't know. It's a constant conversation we're having about how I need the truth, not I don't want anything shined up. So.
They've possibly worked for shouty people who've been really disgusting if they've gone over their hours, and so it's put the fear of God into them. I don't know. It's a real cultural thing, though. I think this, working till 10 p.m, faking your timesheet and pretending everything in the garden is rosy, and then wondering why our fees keep going down and down on a percentage basis, because we just have this inherent, sort of weird culture that we need to get past if we're ever going to value what we do and allow other people to value what we do.
I think you're right. There is a strange cultural thing in architecture about not wanting to talk about money, that it somehow seems to be, if you're really looking carefully at the financials and what it costs, that's somehow,
dirty.
It's a bit dirty. It's a lot of what we do, which I find very odd. I mean, that's because I'm an ex-banker. I don't know. I just think, and I think, coming back to, I guess, B Corp, one of the things that I like about it, it's not saying that you can't be a profitable business and an ethical business. Those things are not exclusive. So it's this idea that they're actually very complementary as well. That, everything Lee's saying about, the fact that you're focusing on that and taking an interest in that, and it's very visible and it's an open, transparent conversation, actually helps you to build a really profitable business, not the other way around.
Fantastic.
Can we go back to a question from Greta about how staff respond to this? Greta, are you there? Where are you? I can't see your red hair.
I am. I'm here. Yeah, I was just wondering how your staff were responding to that transparency, because obviously, as the discussion we've just been talking about it, some places are less transparent than others. And if somebody has come through from a place like that before, that kind of transparency, how are they engaging with that? Or it's like, if you're a student and that's what you expect, then how have you found that kind of process that you've put forward?
Some do find it a bit hard, but I'm really clear on if the hours are if they've gone over the hours, there's a couple of things that have gone wrong, not just one thing. They've gone over the hours, so maybe they haven't been efficient in managing their time and managing the process, or I got the fee proposal wrong. So it's, you know, there's a number of things, or the client is kind of, you know, causing us trouble, which is something maybe we can't control. It's not about they're looking for what went wrong or who's to blame or making people feel like they've, you know, they've pushed us into bankruptcy or anything. It's just about having that really open conversation about all the factors that go into making a job be profitable, and what do you need to manage your time, and what do you need to manage, you know, consultants and all of those things that can influence it.
I think it's incredibly interesting how people do respond to it. I mean, I have had a few people say to me they joined the practice and said, oh, you know, I really want my own practice. In the end, a couple of people have changed their mind or said perhaps I'll wait a little bit longer once they see the reality of what it takes to run a practice and how difficult it can be to run a profitable practice. But I think what's really great is you sort of see people, you know, feel quite empowered, I guess, to have conversations with clients, for example, about things like variations. You know, they're very conscious of, you know, if something is within scope, you know, and it becomes something that all staff, you know, in a really sort of open, transparent way, more and more we're sort of seeing staff kind of identify, oh, this isn't something that's in scope, I think it'll take this long, do you want us to flag it with the client? And it's quite junior staff as well, which is, again, really, really helpful to be able to do that, rather than you get to the end of it and suddenly go, oh, hang on, why you know, we spent all this time and all this wasn't really included. So it's incredibly interesting to see people being willing to have that conversation and kind of step up and take responsibility for projects.
Mel has made a couple of comments in the chat, and Mel, I'd just be great if you want to talk to that around the connect between sort of fee and time estimates and the impact. And I'm interested to know if being a B Corp has helped. But Mel, do you want to expand on that?
Can you hear me? Sorry. Yeah. I mean, we haven't, I was quite inspired by Lee when they first got their B Corp, but last year our B Corp journey was scuppered by personal matters. My husband inconveniently having a heart attack. Thankfully he's fine, don't worry about it. But actually we this year used our time to kind of do our ISO 9001, and I just wanted to say I agree with Lee and Stephanie that having those certifications is really important, especially with government work and so forth. But B Corp does hold you to things that those processes and certifications don't hold you to necessarily. And I think these conversations around fees and time management, you know, they are critical to, as everyone's been saying, to the health of a practice and a business. One thing that we have, a discipline that we have done every week in office meetings in my practice for at least the last 5 or 6 years, is that every Monday at our office meeting, we talk about the project's time that wasn't spent the previous week, time that needs to be spent this week, how a deadline's going, and we articulate the hours in the very boring Excel, but very simple because it's hard to break. And in doing that, we horse trade hours. You know, we get people to be involved in seeing what it takes to sometimes meet the deadline, but it's always with the bottom line being that the total number of hours is never more than 38. There is no encouragement around overtime. I am making it visible every week that these deadlines are achievable within the time that people are expected to be here, and that there is no expectation that there are endless hours. And I think when you articulate time in that way, it does sound super pragmatic, but it means that you know, junior members of staff are confident to say, look, you know, I just don't think I can get that piece of work done in this much time. I might have to spend less time on this project. And so the management of the deadlines and the projects and the priorities becomes a shared responsibility between everyone in the practice. Now I understand that's hard to do in larger practices, but I'm sure when people are working on projects and in project teams in large practices, those same conversations could take place. And I think this is something that just, you know, that it encourages that transparency and honesty and the sharing nature of it, that my team aren't just receiving an instruction on high from me, you know, or one of the associates to say you can only spend this many hours, but actually to get feedback from people saying, you know, doing that piece of work or that piece of 3D modeling takes 20 hours, not 15 hours, because all those hours have an impact on your fee and your time. So we use that feedback to then feed back into our master sort of worksheet that we work out our fees in. And I'm really open about that. All the project worksheets, all the fee proposals are readily accessible to everyone. They're all there in eTrack, which we use as our project management software. And I just think, yeah, it's uncomfortable sometimes because a fee that maybe I didn't put enough time into, you know, shines a spotlight on maybe where I underestimated things. But at the end of the day, it means that responsibility is shared. And I think that's incredibly important.
Mm. Okay, we've got not much time left. There are two things I'd like to talk to, both of which have also come up in the questions. Sorry, Alison, I'm sort of taking over. Shut me up if you want to. One of which is that relationship between practice culture, business, and quality of work. And Stephanie alluded to it before that, you know, often in the sort of parts of the architectural community, taking business seriously is somehow seen as this dreadful thing, and if you do that, you can't really be committed to doing good work, which I think is a particularly stupid myth that pervades architecture. And the other one is often, you know, that practices can't afford to have good workplaces because they're too busy trying to produce good work, which is also completely ridiculous and stupid. So I'm just what's the question? What's your attitude about the relationship between culture, business, and quality of built work? I know you're going to say what I want to hear, but you know.
I mean, oh, sorry.
There you go, Steph.
I was going to say, and I guess my view on that is that, you know, the quality of the work is directly influenced by the extent to which people feel invested in the outcome and in the practice. And that's, you know, that's what really matters. If people believe that, you know, it's about more than just money, that it's actually about a shared kind of vision, then I think that's where you get that investment in quality of work. And I think it goes sort of further towards, you know, people's idea of themselves and their trajectory within a practice. So things like succession planning and, you know, sort of long-term ideas around ownership, I think are really important in that as well. You know, that's where you get, I think, that quality, because people will behave as though it is their own business. And if they're owners, it is their own business. So I think that's not something that I think is mutually exclusive in terms of being profitable. Like, I think that if you come to it with an abundance idea rather than a scarcity idea, the bigger the pie is, the more people are invested in it, the better the outcome. I really believe that's true. I think that, so it's a very confused kind of answer to it, but I don't think those things are mutually exclusive. I think that they're completely aligned, that the more you can give people the opportunity to take ownership and to drive outcomes, then that's where you get that quality and that engagement, and you see it in the work.
Yeah, I mean, I also find that once you get people to understand, you know, how the practice sits in terms of the values of the whole practice, but also the quality of the work that you're expecting and you're all striving for, they almost become the police in the room.
Totally.
on some things. So I know I just recently had a conversation with one of our staff members about a wildlife sanctuary that we're doing, which is on a very, very tight budget. And I said, well, maybe we can do some of these buildings as prefab buildings, and we can get this factory up, you know, in this town close by to build these prefab, you know, houses to put on the sanctuary. And he just turned around and said, well, how's that going to sit with our kind of quality of architecture and our ethical stance on sustainability and da 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 da. And I'm like, but we have to get it built for the budget, you know, we have to. And so this discussion went backwards and forwards, where I was actually the bad guy in the room because I was focused on getting something built for the budget, and I'm arguing, you know, if we don't get it built, the koalas will all die. And he's arguing, but we've got to be holistic about how we look at this. We can't just look at that. If that's what we need to go and find more money. And so it's actually, and he's a very junior architect in our office, like and so it once you kind of hand over and you kind of get engagement and ownership on this sort of general set of values and principles that you're trying to work to, then everyone becomes the police. And it's not left then up to me and Ashley to kind of say, no, we can't do that, we must do this, and because everyone's signed up. So
Okay, I'm going to go to Elise quickly for a question about people inflating their hours so that they appear busy, and that may be an issue at the moment. And then I just want to, so let's do that. And then I want to wrap up about what those of who are in the audience who are employees might do to kind of shift their practices in the right direction. And we might go to Budru for her question on that. So Elise, do you want to ask your question first? Elise Maynard, you there? No? Okay. Well, I'm going to ask it. What do you do if team members inflate their hours when they have periods that they have nothing to do, as they didn't want to highlight to the practice manager that they have nothing to go on with? The whole problem, you can end up with a whole lot of people in the office just logging hours against a project but not actively working on it. Sounds horrendous. What do you do in that situation?
I don't think I've ever been in that situation.
Why? I mean, it's linked to what they're, any discussion that we have is linked to what their own kind of scope and, deliverables are. So if someone's got 100 hours, we have an open conversation about what we expect out of that 100 hours. So, I mean, maybe it's just because we're only 10 people, but I just can't imagine anyone being actually able to get away with that. We would be like, well, where's the thing? Where's the thing that you've been working on? And then, that would cause kind of significant issues for their ongoing employment, I would think. So.
Okay, and can we go back to an old question way back here from Budru about how one might nudge practices towards this kind of thing. Budru, are you here?
Yeah, sorry, I can't open my webcam because I'm also multitasking a little bit. But yeah, no, as the question says pretty simply, there are lots, like not everyone prioritizes using the business for greater good. But there are companies who are on the fence, would like to do it, but is also looking for a solid incentive to actually sign up with the B Corp philosophy or committing to that. So what are the kind of incentives, or what is a selling point to them, basically? What is a selling point to those on the fence?
I would say, I mean, apart from, we already talked about, becoming part of evaluation criteria, the other really big selling point is that we found it's the #1 factor in attracting good staff. It's a competitive market. If you want really interesting, engaged, talented people to work for you, this is the type of thing that will attract that type of talent, and I think that's a pretty good incentive, I would have thought.
Yeah, and that the only thing I'd add to that is that, nudge theory basically says that you much better off pointing towards what they're already doing well. So if you wanted someone to become a B Corp, I think what I would do is I'd point out all the ways that they're going to find that they already could be registered, could certify. So, if they do have a good employee policy, or if they do have good, or just lucky enough to kind of work from home, so therefore their travel is very low, then that's just a kind of an easy win. So it's always the case of, if you're trying to pull someone over the line towards something, show them how they're already halfway there first before you point out to them the hard work they're going to have to do next.
Thank you. That's a really, really great answer, especially regarding the nudging point. Never thought of it like that. That it's always easier to convince someone if you tell them what they've already got, rather than saying, oh, you got to drive 500 miles for it. So, but no, thank you. And yes, regarding the attracting good employees, there's also that mindset that, oh, there's a lot of people, you're another brick in the wall, you can be replaced in a second's notice. There is also that kind of environment in certain companies. So that's nice to hear that from you, Stephanie. Thanks so much for that.
Yes, I think we're all... Sorry.
Oh, sorry, it's just a very quick sort of practical question, and I'm sure I could go and look this up online. Two things though. One is, what does it cost? Is there a cost to the actual process of becoming certified? But the other thing is, what happens to you if you're bad? Do they kick you out? Do they take it away? Like, what happens?
Well, there's
I
sliding.
don't know.
Yeah, they do. There's a sliding scale in terms of the registration. It is online. I don't know off the top of my head, but I think it's relatively affordable for small and medium practice to do. I didn't get sticky shock when I first looked at it. So, and it's based I think on turnover, I think, from memory. And then in terms of, Lee can probably speak more to this. It's not like you certify and then you're done. You get audited regularly to have to maintain your standards. It's not like you get registered and then you're done. You've got to keep improving.
And we do you do all your audits, you submit all your material, and then you have this long kind of interview that is always hard to organise because they're in California, and they go through it all. And there's an element to that which is quite coachy. They're like, oh, well, this is good, but did you realise if you did this, So I think if you were sitting on the borderline, or even if you failed, you could get, you could kind of get coached by B Corp to what you need to do to make the score better. So, but yeah, basically, I think there's a minimum to give you an indication of how hard the test is. It's the score you get is out of 200, and I think to become a B Corp, you have to get 80. Is that right, Stephanie? Or 80? I think it was 80. And I think we're currently sitting on 88, and we think we're pretty good. And some of the best scoring companies in the world, I think, are only on like 110 or 115 or something. So it's pretty. They run a pretty tight ship.
Okay, I think we probably need to wrap up, but there's a very good comment here from MAJ, who's pointed out that this session was called Ethics in Practice, and it's really focused very much on the ethics within a practice and the kind of good management and of a practice, and what about the kind of broader question of architects and ethics doing good for others. And I think that's a very good and reasonable comment in MAJ, and one that I think we could certainly address in another session, and one that actually Lee has written about a long time ago for Parla, when she pointed out that it's all very well talking about improving things for women in architecture, but what can architecture do for women who find themselves in less advantaged situations? So certainly something that is on our horizon and agenda, and that we are, thank you, and we'll look at doing something in the future. I think I was a bit wary when I called it Ethics in Practice because it's such a huge and enormous topic. So this, I guess, is just the first bite at one bit of it. So thank you. We actually have the session for next week lined up in advance, which is very unusual for me. We've got a migration lawyer coming to join us to talk specifically to some of the challenges that international students or people in Australia who are not citizens may be facing at the moment. I would encourage you, those of you who are Australian citizens, to still consider coming to that. It's not directly about matters that will affect you, but I think it will be very, very interesting and helpful for you to understand the situation that some of our colleagues find themselves in. So do kind of come along to help build empathy, if nothing else, to find out how you can support people too. And we've also on Monday got our first session in the Research Lab series, which is a new series of events because we weren't doing enough, that we've set up in collaboration with UQ and SAHANS, which is the Society of Architectural Historians Australia and New Zealand. And that is particularly aimed at sharing knowledge of research that's going on within academia, but also elsewhere. It's a long-term interest of mine. Really, that sort of space between practice and academia, and often I think there's just not enough exchange that happens. So we're trying to facilitate that, and that's being run by Macarena de la Vega de Leon and Carly Marnane. So it's going to happen monthly. Monday's the first one. And again, it takes quite a conversational format. So both the speakers, its topic is, because it's Parlour, Women in Architecture is our first topic, and our own Jill Matthewson is one of the speakers, and Julie Collins, who was a fabulous Instagram guest host recently from the archive in Australia, in South Australia. So very, very short presentations from both, and then quite a conversational format. There'll also be opportunity to ask questions from the floor with that. So hope we'll see you. Bookings are going really well, but there's still space. Hopefully we'll see you there. Thank you to our partners without whom we can't do any of this. We're very happy that our partners have stuck with us in this very difficult time. Claps for our fabulous speakers. Go on. Thank you to Alison for joining me as co-host. We may have Naomi back next week. Let's see how we go. I think that's it. Have a lovely Friday. Alison, do you want to say anything else?
Just thanks everyone. It was a great session. I could have kept asking. I had a couple of other questions that kept coming up. So it was fantastic. Thanks, Lee and Stephanie. Thanks everyone.
Great. And as I said, a topic that we know needs, more air. So thank you.